Hi, so today I'm with Jeanne Dagenais Lespe rance, and she's going to tell us about the work she's done in Montreal about producing masks at the beginning of the pandemic. So Jeanne, maybe you could tell us a little bit about who you are and what you've done.
I'm a teacher in French for adults, and I'm also a master's student in social work. So that's my background, and another important part of myself is that I'm also a seamstress, and I work with textiles a lot. So in a nutshell, that's who I am.
Could you maybe tell us what you and the people you work with started to do at the beginning of the pandemic to respond to the lack of personal protective equipment?
I think we've responded to that lack, but we've also responded. The idea was also to find a way to canalize the anxiety and the fact that we were all overwhelmed by what was happening. So the idea was first to try to find a way to be active. So when we were linked through the networks and Parkex with a lot of people, and someone said we need masks, we need to find masks, we need to make them. And as a seamstress, that was something that I thought, hey, I can do that. I'm not a virus researcher, but I can totally make masks. I can have access to that knowledge. And then through someone working at the elementary school, we got the names of a lot of mothers that were involved with the parents groups. And normally the parents groups, especially in Parkex, play a huge role in language practice, integration, empowerment of women. So we got the names of mothers that were active, and some of them said yeah, I can sew. I'm happy to sew masks. Just call me and I'll do that. And so this network started this way of me calling them, telling them, I can have access to sewing machine. Are you interested in sewing masks? And can you just tell me if you can make maybe around 20 a week? And if you can't, it's okay. It's just that we'll prioritize someone else for the machines. Because there were machines that we had gotten from a local organization for a project I led there. I knew we had 3 machines. There were some seamstresses. We could maybe have access to fabric. So the idea was just linking these points together. And so I got to phone these seamstresses, and everyone was yeah, bring me stuff. I can produce. I'm ready. I have nothing to do. I'm stuck at home with my kids. And then there was also the mutual aid group in Park Extension that was really active. And I also posted there saying, we're seamstresses, we're ready to make masks, but we need fabric. Maybe some of you have cotton left at home, and it's someone else that offered to put a drop-off point in front of her studio. So some people left fabrics there. So we had these kind of networks of fabrics are donated. I had sewing machines. Some people in my network said also, I have sewing machines, I can give them away. So it was really this feeling of being part of the resistance at first, because I was there with no car, with my little trolley, walking around the city, carrying sewing machines to bring back, trying to repair them, bringing fabric. So it was this, and receiving phone calls. And after we started a little, receiving phone calls of people saying, I need more thread, I need more fabric, this machine has problems with the zigzag stitch, can we, trying to problem solve. And also, and at the same time, we also received a small grant that was extremely important in the later developments, because that allowed to pay for the masks, and which was for me extremely important in terms of recognizing that this is work that women are doing. Yes, it's volunteer, but almost, except one seamstress that has citizenship, everyone else had refugee status and had no access to serve. So it was extremely important for me to pay them a fair price, and also for their expertise.
Just to clarify for everyone, that CERB is the income supplement given by the Canadian government during the pandemic. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. What was absolutely fabulous was that also people who got involved in Parkex were mostly from the Punjabi communities, Punjabi refugees, with an extremely advanced knowledge of textiles and sewing. So, and then it ended up just being mutual aid. If someone was calling me saying, I have problems with the machine, I would say, okay, I'm going to give you Manjeet's phone number. Manjeet will like do a video in Punjabi. She will explain you like how to do some like problem solving. And then was also the idea of like, okay, but we also need to give them, like, then we had to also find a network through, again, the mutual aid. We were receiving requests, sometimes people at like a food sharing space asking like, hey, can we have 80 masks? Like, okay, no worries, I can bring you 80 masks. And we were working this way through small requests, people asking for their families, people asking because a friend of a friend was making masks and they wanted some. But it was all operated out of like my mailbox and my staircase, and like trying to manage these drop points and these contacts while being safe and also acknowledging the need of social interaction. And so that's how the initiative started, and we've been making over 1,200 masks, and then the grant stopped, so I had no more money to pay. And so we are right now at a moment of thinking forward, because I'm kind of against the idea of just selling them. I think they should be publicly subsidized. And also there are lots of small companies already producing. So the idea is not also to create another item just for the sake of creating an item. So we are also thinking about like how to go forward. Is there still a need, both in terms of employment and in terms of the material, and like how to make all of this work.
What do you think were the biggest challenges in the work?
I think networking through distance was certainly one. B was that there were a lot of people willing to do extremely precise tasks that did not involve a lot of organizing. But when it came to people taking on bigger responsibilities, that's the moment where it was harder to manage. So the part of production and organizing that was really easy, but for me what became more difficult was the distribution part of knowing exactly what was needed, where to bring them, when to bring them, who was picking them up. And it was all of this where maybe personally I was less interested in, but that was also more complex of knowing who to bring them to. And then suddenly the city would answer like, no, we're not funding what you're doing because we've decided to buy our own masks, probably made in China, and we're going to distribute them. And we have 50,000 and we're giving them away, so we're not giving you money, so you produce others made in the neighborhood. So it was also all of this that became complex.
It's interesting because at the beginning of the pandemic, there was so much sort of questions about were masks really necessary, were people going to use them? Did you have to navigate sort of the public health messaging as well?
Exactly. And I'm lucky enough to have a lot of people in my family that are in the healthcare system. So quite early on from March, there were already people sending me articles from the New York Times talking about the need for masks, that we will need them at one point. So it started from there, and from my grandmother calling me saying like, hey, we need like masks for the 40 people in our family. Can you like make them for next week? And I think it happened in a lot of families of people calling the seamstresses of their network and asking them for support. And then there was the whole public health in Quebec especially had really badly navigated the mask recommendations, which were extremely unclear, which were not having any confidence in people to understand how masks are supposed to be worn, which I think added a lot of like blurriness in what to do. So we had to read that, and also there are lots of very helpful Facebook groups of people in sewing that were sharing the different models that were recommended by different public health agencies around the world. And actually the one that was the most shared was a French pattern, which was tested and recommended and very specifically described. While in Canada, and especially in Quebec, there was nothing in terms of the patterning. of like, is it good to have a seam in the middle of your face or not? Like, what's good in terms of fabric? Should you go for 100% cotton? Can you have a linen mix? Can you have a hemp mix? Like all of these things that can have a huge impact on particle distribution, but like what's the best way to work it out? So we did have to read through that and find kind of the best option given the circumstances, while knowing that people base their choices often on aesthetics. So even though we follow certain advices in terms of patterning, if people want like another pattern and that's the one they would wear, is a non-ideal pattern that is worn better than an ideal pattern that is not worn, like what do we do with that?
We're doing this interview on August 27th, and today is the day kids are going back to school in Quebec. And so we're sort of all anticipating a second wave. Do you see yourself continuing this work? Like, do you think there's another need? What would you like to see differently this time around if it came to that?
What I would want is that the government subsidizes mass production, that it's not to the individual of doing it. And not any mass production. I think the government, in terms of long-term planning, needs to subsidize reusable masks that are in materials that are totally biodegradable. Because I think we're just like, in French, you have these expressions of like, you're just like making one problem worse by trying to fix the other one. And I think we've seen in terms of waste in the streets, the amount that personal equipment makes, and that's gonna end up in landfills, and that's gonna end up in other health problems for other populations. And so I think the government needs to think about it in a long-term planning way. And I don't know if it's schools that need to in terms of the distribution, I don't know where it should come from. Also, for me, in terms of what we're going to do with the second wave, the network is now built. There are people that have sewing machines at home that are linked to the school. They are mothers of the schools. They are directly parents groups. They know the kids, they know the other parents. They're ready to produce, but I think going through a capitalist way, like a capitalist production mode, will not necessarily lead to better protection, because for people to be justly paid, it would necessarily be more expensive than a mask at Dolorama. And I think that's where public health comes in, and like public thinking comes in terms of what would be like better collectively. Of course, it would be to pay like small local makers to make the masks and to make them almost to measure for the taste of the person, so that people actually wear them. So we'll see what happens with that. So for me, I'm happy to make masks if needed, but if the government relies on industries to fix that problem, I'm not ready to compete, and I don't want to go into item production and then be stuck with like 1,000 masks at home that can't be sold, but I have to sell if I want to pay the producers. This network of sewing was important in March. It's not only in terms of production, but also in terms of isolation, of connecting people, of talking, of meeting neighbors. So for the second wave, we'll see what happens, but also some of the makers are starting to look for jobs, or maybe going to find other ways of being paid, and that's fabulous. Even if the project ends up being their first Canadian work experience, I'm happy about that. And if other makers end up taking on like the next steps, that's absolutely fabulous. And I think with that, I'm like quite happy with what happened, and we're ready in terms of resilience if other people need to work and produce them. But if there are other people that take on the tasks of making masks, we'll just concentrate on other things.